All right, hello everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. So, as you might have noticed, your camera and microphones are disabled for this webinar. This has to do with the GDPR laws. This webinar will be recorded and posted on the webinars page early next week. And with that said, I will officially open this webinar. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this European Commission's webinar on Universal Design for Learning and eTwinning in Action. This webinar is organized by the European School Education Platform, which we invite you to take a look at your earliest convenience. Myself and my colleague Veronica will post all the necessary links in the chat. And today we will take a moment to unwind from our busy school week and take a look at the latest UDL 3.0 framework. We will explore how this framework can be used and elevate eTwinning projects by addressing the needs of all of our students. And without further delays, I would very much like to welcome today's speaker, Richard Powers. Richard teaches future teachers instructional design, universal design for learning, and how to teach online at the Professional School of Education in Stuttgart, Ludwigsburg in Germany. And he's also an ITE ambassador, and Richard facilitates eTwinning workshops. And since 2019, he has helped teachers, student teachers, and administrators bring eTwinning into the curriculum at both universities and schools in Germany. Richard won the Stuttgart University Teaching Prize in 2022 for his course Project-Based Learning with eTwinning and Erasmus Plus for Interculturality. Richard, the virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you, Kira, for that amazing introduction. It was wonderful. And I hope everybody takes those words to heart about relaxing and enjoying this afternoon. We're a whole group of educators, and now we can be together and talk about these different ideas and how they kind of apply with UDL and eTwinning. But first of all, maybe to get started, if you could, in the chat, just say hello, and then where are you physically today? Where are you sitting and then coming from? You know, I'm in a conference in Berlin, for example, today at OEB. You know, Steen's here from Norway. Hello. Romania. I just love it, the whole eTwinning community. Poland, Czech Republic. It's great. Barcelona, Italy. I mean, we should do eTwinning projects now because everybody is here together. And certainly it's a great chance to network. So if you have the chance you're looking for a project partner, you have an idea, you could put that in the chat too. Say, hi, my name is, I'm trying to, and contact me, right? So we get people from Greece, special needs. Wonderful. Welcome everybody. Because I'm going to share my screen. Now, today's talk is about Universal Design for Learning 3.0, and maybe Universal Design for Learning UDL is already a concept that you know, and 3.0 came about in July. So we're going to talk about what's new and why it matters. Now, the first thing about universal design that you should think about is that it really comes from the world of architecture. So universal design itself comes this idea that when you start to make something an architecture, a building, what you would do is think of all the barriers for potential users that would have it, and then move away from those in the design. So that the initial design for it is for all users and thinking about all of their needs. So what this slide shows is accommodation on the left, and then universal design on the right. So you see with accommodation, the stairs were there first. And then they realized, oh my gosh, people with wheelchairs, people with rollers, or strollers with babies wouldn't be able to use that. So they built an accommodation next to it. Now, this is not universal design. It's still equitable because now everybody has a way to get up there. But if you look on the right, when these planners, they already had accessibility in mind. And they said, okay, we don't need one or two things, we just need one way. What are all of our users that would use this path? Bicycles, wheelchairs, people walking. So that's kind of where this idea of universal design is. So when we go to universal design for learning, it's the same type of approach, but as educators, as designers, you think about all the users, all of the students that are in your course, and what would be the potential barriers. These days, we talk about neurodiversity and on our whole range, rather than talking about students that are dyslexic, students who have ADHD, medical conditions. We just talk about all the different learners that are in the room, and then look at the assignment or look at the homework or look at the test and see if there's anything about that, a barrier that would lie in the way for that. So first of all, does that make sense, everybody? Universal design is a concept from architecture, and now universal design for learning, we're thinking about all the users in terms of their learn preferences. They might be an audio learner, or they might be a visual learner, or they might need to move when they learn. So if we have options in the lesson for that built in originally from the design, then we have a universal design for learning assignment. Okay, so these new updates came July 29th, 2024, and what we'll slowly go through what these changes are, and then maybe what you can do is in the chat, think about if you like the change or you don't like the change. Think, wow, this is a revision that's not really helpful. The other interesting part is to think about our eTwinning projects. A lot of us work with schools, some people work with universities. So now how could the lessons be designed using UDL? That eTwinning projects might be involved with that. For example, I work with university student teachers. So for them to use UDL to revise a lesson is really a good lesson. But now for you, if you're teaching fourth graders or fifth graders, trying to have them use UDL in the eTwinning project doesn't really work, right? You don't want to explain all this theory. So what you do is whatever your project is, you get ready to create the project. You have all your basic ingredients, the description, the timeline, the goals, and then you look at it through the lens of UDL and say, how could I change my lesson, revise the lesson to make it better for all the learners and the different preferences? Do I have something coming in there? Okay, so let's get started. CAST.org is the organization responsible for UDL. So if you have a moment, go to your browser and enter cast.org. And that's the website where you will find the framework. So 3.0, the goals were to address the critical barriers rooted in biases and systems of oppression. So they thought that before I was only dealing with learner variability, and it needed to bring in cultural variability too. So that it wasn't enough just to talk about people's ability. We also had to think about their feelings of being comfortable in the classroom, a sense of belonging in the classroom, a sense of my teacher cares about my progress. And without all of that, that universal design wouldn't be out there for all the learners. So the idea of 3.0, reimagine the UL guidelines as a tool for designing more equitable and just learning environments. And really, this is great. This is something that eTwinning and Erasmus Plus already does. It's in part of the DNA of the projects, international groups talking about equity, and having these things in there. So here's the framework. Okay, it's very small. Don't worry about trying to copy it and write everything down. Just do an overview for it. On the right, you can see the dates of the different versions. So version 1.0 came in 2008, 2 in 2011, and then version 2.2, the one that we're revising from, is 2018, right? And then the new one, 3.0, is here. So at the top, what you can see, the whole goal of UDL, learner agency. And learner agency is really the empowered learner has options to figure out how they're going to learn the material. They know what the goal is, but now the empowered way is to figure out how to get there. The UDL metaphor is usually a skier at the top of a mountain, and there's lots of ways that the skier can go down. The skier could go down straight or could side to side. They could go slowly, they could stop and then go at the pace moves forward. So there's a lot of agency in the skier of figuring out how to get to the bottom. Now that's the goal with the homework assignments, with the tests, with the projects. The teacher kind of says, here's what we're going to do. And now if I've designed it well, there are options in the learning so they can help you figure out how you're going to get there. I'm not going to tell you how to do it. I'll show you what I'm looking for. I'll give you examples, but it's up to you to figure out based on your learning preferences of how you're going to learn the material. And I know some of you are thinking, wow, that means the learner has to know their learner preferences. So these kinds of conversations in classes are very important if you're trying to promote UDL. Let's say you're a math teacher or you're a French teacher. That's what you're going to be teaching the class. And then you have conversations with them. How are you going to learn this? How do you like learning math? Do you like math with the textbook? Do you like videos with math? Do you like math with Kahoot? Do you like doing on a Padlet? Do you like doing together with friends? How do you like to learn? And when you have these discussions, even with pupils in fourth grade, fifth grade, up through university, they start recognizing that there isn't one way to learn, that people in the class are learning in different ways. And that's where the UDL message is coming from, is that everybody's brain is different and we learn differently. So the whole principle of UDL, this new goal, is learner agency and helping learners be able to tell you how they like to learn as teachers. So if they're in a math class and the only thing the teacher is using is a textbook and a test, that learner would be able to come to you and say, hello, teacher, you're only using a textbook. I like videos. Can we get some videos with this? See, that's that learner agency. Lots of times today, the learner just takes what the teacher tells them and says, hey, okay, this is what you're going to kind of do. And they don't really think about what's the best way to learn. The nice part about UDL and the brain is it also says that learners learn differently. So we could maybe learn a foreign language one way and learn math and science in another way. So our preferences can change. So a good UDL framework in school, the goal is showing learners how to learn. And it doesn't matter if they then go on to university or if they go out and get jobs or they're going to work on a farm or they're going to go and have a family after school. They know how to learn. So if they have to learn whatever it is, a new skill, a new job, how to change diapers for a baby, they're not afraid of learning. They know how to learn. And so then they go and they pursue what that is. Okay, so let's go back to the framework. See on the screen, there are 3 principles of UDL, and it's really that simple. Complex theory put into an easy to remember framework. The E stands for engagement. The R stands for representation, and the A stands for action and expression. Now, the little figures of the brain are also tied into the principles. So that means The strategies for curiosity in the brain, in the middle of the brain, are the ones that are used for engagement. Those are the parts of the brain that are stimulated by questions like why and curiosity. Also, things like why am I in this class? Why are we learning this? Why is this important? Why is the homework so important? Why do I have to do that? All of that comes under this area of engagement. When you move over to representation, the easiest way to think about this is perception, how the new material that you're trying to learn, the new topic, comes into the brain, right? Is it a textbook? Is it a video? Right? Are there sheets of paper? Is it a work form, worksheet? You know, what are the ways that the information is there? And if it's a textbook, is the print adjustable? If it's only one small print size of 10 or 12, that's not good for all learners in there. So there's an ability to adjust with that. The other concept of representation, if you think about the learners in your class, they come from a diverse background, maybe different languages, different countries. Is the content that you're using in the course reflective of that? A good example might be here in Germany in the 4th grade, we're learning about poetry. So now it's to take a poem and read the poem. So the typical scenario is the teacher picks a poem in German, and then everybody reads that same poem and analyzes it. But they might not have if the same interests in the poem. So a UDL example of what could be then done is that the teacher says the assignment is about how to learn a poem. I've got 4 or 5 countries in the class or background. Go and find a poem from your country, talk to your parents, get a poem, and then bring that in. And then the class looks at a number of different poems moving forward. So representation is the course materials. How are you presenting information to the learners? Now when we switch over to action and expression, that's how the learner, after looking at the content, shows the teacher how they've met the learning objective. Usually this comes in the form of a test, but there could be other things that the teacher's using in tests. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's a video, maybe it's a Padlet, maybe it's a whiteboard. There's another ways to show that they've learned something in there. So those are the 3 principles of UDL: engagement and motivation, representation, how the materials are coming to it, and then the action and expression, how it's returned to the teacher coming in there. So what's important with the framework is not to think of these as rules, laws, or standards. What they are is like a toolbox. So if you've got an issue in your classroom, think about an assignment. Maybe there's one assignment that the students in your class are not doing a great job with. They do well, pretty well on these other ones, but now this one is giving them a problem. Then you ask yourself, is it an issue with engagement? Is it because they're not motivated? They don't understand the context. They don't have the information they need before and after of where it comes as they build knowledge. Or is it an issue with representation? Maybe they didn't have enough information that they needed to do the homework or the assignment, or maybe it was too difficult to read, or there wasn't a translation available if they needed that. Or is the issue with the actual test? Was all the information that was on the test covered by the content that was in the representation? So in other words, what UDL does, it helps us be like nurses or doctors and diagnose what's going on in a class. Now, it can also work with the learner. So if the learner comes to you and does a poor job on a test or an assignment, and is frustrated and says, look, I got a bad grade, what can I do? Then sometimes a normal answer is you just have to try harder. I believe in you, you can do it. But as effective that is motivating, it doesn't really give practical ideas about what to do. So a UDL person might say, How are you learning? What did you do? How did you study? And maybe if it's a vocabulary test, and they said, well, I just wrote down the words, I memorized them, and I wrote them down. And the teacher might say, hey, maybe you're a learner who flashcards work really well for. So let's find some Quizlet flashcards, and you can retake the test and see if that works for you, right? So to be sure, after this UDL framework is not something to memorize and to make sure that you do. It's more like you think about, you've got a problem or an issue, and now you're trying to think, is it an issue with engagement, with representation, or with action and expression? So it's not a one size fits all as far as they go. Okay, great. Back to CAST, the Center for Applied Science and Technology. If you're out there, go to cast.org and click Our Impact. It's kind of hidden under there, but if you see Our Impact underneath, you see Universal Design for Learning. And there's also, if you've got your phone, there's a QR code you can get to it too. And it's right underneath their Universal Design for Learning. When you click that, the guidelines will pop up, and then it's a framework, and you can print it out. It's a one pager, so it's kind of easy to print out and have by your desk, and then kind of go through what those are. Again, here's the framework. You get with your QR code, and those principles again: engagement, representation, and action and expression. And we talked earlier about the part of the brain with engagement, right? The middle circuits here too. And now with representation, the back of the brain and the front of the brain, action and expression. This is where things for like strategy, deadlines, planning, checklists, all of those types of things work really well. All right, so we get to 3.0. Here are the overarching shifts. The new changes is that identity is an important part of variability. Bias can create barriers to learning. Learner agency is the goal, and there's a value of collective learning. And with collective learning, the point is not meant about collaborative and group projects that we do so well with eTwinning. It's really about the teacher and the learner working together to come up with what the assignments might be, to what the homework might be, to what the project might be. So collective learning is something that eTwinning already does pretty well. There's this good negotiation between the teacher and the project members when they work together to put it together, right? So some kind of prompts out there. Which shift do you already understand? Like maybe you a lot of good interculturalists are shaking your head thinking, well, Rich, I already do this, all part. Also, if you've taught for a number of years, UDL may seem to you very part of what you already do. And I think that's because these principles of UDL come to us after years of teaching because of trial and effort. So maybe if you're a new teacher or a student teacher, when I teach this class, they get very excited about these principles because it's more practical than theories of education, where they're writing research papers and learning more about that. And it gives them something that they can take and go directly into the classroom and then use. Now, why do we need all of this cultural variability? I mean, today's workforce, for example, today's classroom, there's not one dominant culture that's represented in the room. So a healthy respect for everybody of belonging so that we see the human inside of everybody and not colors and genders and religions. Learners' mental wellness, very important these days, right? Was a common theme for eTwinning projects too. We have first generation learners whose parents might not have finished school or gone on to university. So those students need extra kind of motivation and support because perhaps the parents don't really understand the value of school. Sure, they know school's important, but can they help with the math homework? Can they help with the foreign language classes? Can they help with maybe helping dreaming of going to college, dreaming of getting your master's degree, dreaming of getting a PhD, for example, and not only limiting students in what they think about. Also, the sense of belonging and connection. And a lot of you out there, you probably think about the classrooms you teach right now. Probably the students get along in groups. right? They sit together, these students like each other, and two, there might be one or two students that are loners or have become isolated just between a different type of way. And there's probably good ways that you do to make them feel more included. Sometimes you have older students in a lower class, like if a student has to repeat a grade, and now they might be 11-year-olds in the classroom, and now you have a 12-year-old in the classroom. So how do you make that sense of belonging so the 12-year-old feels just as important and not shamed or anything as the rest of kind of the class? So that was new in 3.0. This realization that along with all these other rules, that the sense of belonging and connection was super important. And we're preparing students for a diverse workforce out there. Now here's Nicole Tucker-Smith. I encourage you to research her. She runs a company called LessonCast that has blogs about UDL. And Nicole was a big part of writing the new framework. She looked at the research gap between 2.2 and 3.0 and came up with the concepts that we're going to be talking about today. Her concepts of learner agency are built on James Anderson's ideas about learner agency. And if you see in the top right, the power to act, the will to act, and the environment to act in a school. I prefer thinking about learner agency in your classrooms and lessons in terms of none to high. So this is a good reflection exercise right now. Think about a lesson or a class or maybe an eTwinning project that you're getting ready to run or write a proposal for. Where is learner agency in your lesson, in your eTwinning project, or your course? So let's start with none. In a no learner agency scenario, the learners complete the exact same activity with little to no choice about timing, the methods, materials, participation, the topics, the way to describe learning. Everything is done the same way, the same text is read. There's not a lot of choice about how the student moves through that learning environment. Okay, so does that make sense? A lot of our eTwinning projects don't work that way, right? Because a lot of times they're in a group and they're figuring out, they're working together. So there's probably a higher level of learner agency than rather this none type environment. In fact, maybe some of us went to college this way with professors where the lecture was every week and then there was a test. And everybody was tested on the same material in the same way, and they kind of had to guess from the notes what was going to move through to. And there was no really choice about timing and study guides and moving forward. So you weren't really empowered as a learner. Probably wasn't as interesting as something where you had more buy-in with. Let's move up a little bit. If you're a low learner agency, the learners have options, but they still pick the usual ways of doing it, what they are used to or what they think that you want as a teacher. So for example, a UDL person changes the word write a paragraph to create an activity. Okay, if the learning objective is to write a paragraph in English, okay, then they have to write the paragraph in English. But if it's to practice English, then why can't that be a different way, like create a picture, create a diagram, create a role play, create a video, something else using English, and then give the learners options. You could do this, or you could do this, or you could do this. And now you're in a UDL kind of environment where the options are there, so learners get to pick based on their learning preferences. Another interesting thing, you might be very lucky at your schools to have a maker space or a fab lab or a learning lab with 3D printers and things that you can make, laser cutters. There's all kinds of things for the kids that are creative with their hands. Those kinds of kids and university students are sometimes left behind because everything is academic, everything is write a paper, everything is read. So people with reading issues, people with maybe text and attention span, aren't able to do the same types of learning engagement, be excited really that way. So that might be something as an option too. Maybe they can make something rather than write an essay. Good learner agency, learners choose the options, opportunities are there to reflect on their progress. So I think a lot of us do this in our practices. The lesson's over and we ask them, okay, what did you learn? What could have been done better? Let's move forward, right? With the reflection, because the learning connections are coming there too. And now here's a high learner environment. It's almost like the idealized version. I don't know if you can ever have a class that's 100% like this, but it's kind of the goal where learners co-design options with teachers and peers. They offer and receive feedback, try creative approaches, listen and learn from diverse perspectives, and then they share the ideas moving forward. Okay, so what do you think? I mean, this is a nice time for maybe a 30-second chat. Think about either your course or a lesson or an eTwinning project that you're doing. And now, where is learner agency? And identify it by none, low, good, and high. And we'll see what people see. Yeah, I can't see the chat itself, so maybe if here kind of says what kinds of words are coming out. What are people saying about learner agency?
Hello. Low we have coming in.
Oh, oh, interesting. Because what's nice about low is that now you have a place to go. So maybe that was worth coming today and on this Friday afternoon and thinking about, hey, what's something simple that I can do to improve? As a famous UDL specialist, Thomas Tobin, and he says UDL plus one. UDL can be very overwhelming when you first hear it. So he says start with one thing that you're going to do with it. So if you're trying to move learner agency up, trying to do everything with the options and representation, the options and action and expression, the option payment. What's one thing that can improve the area that it needs to be in? So as a summary, what does it mean really to place agency in the hands of our learners and to empower the learners? A lot of teachers are afraid of that way, in the same way that some parents are afraid to give free room for decisions, for failing, for making bad decisions for the children. So the sense of agency isn't in there, and they're always looking to the teacher. What should I do next? What should I do next? Instead of being able to troubleshoot and figure it out for themselves. And then reflection, how can we apply this learner agency in our teaching practices? Okay, here's an idea catcher for learner agency. You don't have lots and lots of time, but if you've got a good idea that then we can share, here's the QR code. And then after the session, you put the link into the chat, and then you can go there. You can maybe write it down there, and then we can kind of put that as you move together. Okay. Let's return to the framework. And now let's get more into what are the changes with engagement, representation, and action and expression. This was the older version. And now with the new version here, up at the top, before it said provide, provide, provide. Now it's changed to design, with the idea that every teacher is also an instructional designer. And if you don't think of yourself as an instruction designer, you really should start changing that, because we think about lesson plans and we think about developing lessons and planning the lessons. But what you're really doing when you're planning a lesson is you're designing a lesson because you have so many different options you can draw from. There's the textbook, right? Then there's supplementary website. There's YouTube videos. There's all kinds of digital products sometimes with textbooks. So you might do a Kahoot exercise or a Padlet, or so many choices. So when you design, starting with the learning objective and then figuring out what is the way that you're going to do as to the design. The other thing that changed in the old version, a checkpoint was changed to a consideration. And people tended to like that because a checkpoint made it seem like it had to have it. where the consideration is more like a reflection and thinking about it too. And the area of engagement, recruiting interest in the other version became to became welcoming interests and identities, and then also nurture joy and play. Right. So maybe you can do a quick comment in the chat. What do you think about that? Nurturing joy and play is now part of the guidelines for engagement. And I'm a university professor, right? So when I first saw this, I was like, well, okay, gamification, I kind of get it. And then when I read more about it, some of the webinars, it's really about creating an environment where it's fun or it's okay to make a mistake. The same way that when you play, things that move around, do things that go on, it's a sense of joy that comes with it. And so when your student is curious about something, they learn it, and then there's the spark of, okay, now I get it. It's not a stressful, here comes the test, I'm afraid environment, but it's looking forward to the test as an activity to show that they're going to be able to learn. So it's a nice way of thinking, nurturing joy and play. And probably if you're a kindergarten teacher, special needs, primary school teacher, you already do it. So the challenge is now for the secondary teachers and secondary school teachers and for the university teachers to bring that into the other part of this is to change the narrative. It's common in Germany, maybe in your country too. They say math is hard, science is difficult, right? Well, part of that is change the narrative. If you're a math or a science teacher, change it. Say math is fun, math is cool, science is super, science is wonderful. So that the narrative, so when you hear kids saying it's hard, you don't shake your head and say, yeah, I know it's hard, but you can do it. You can study. You're a good learner. But you say, no, it's not. Get passionate and enjoy it. If you teach math, if you teach science, if you teach languages, you're going to enjoy those things and really kind of like them and see how they work, right? Ooh. What else? With self-regulation is changed to emotional growth, right? So that can help as well moving forward. In comprehensions change to building knowledge. The old days, that's how that worked. And then physical action changed to interaction. And the older concept of executive functions then changed to strategy development. Right? So that was a nice fix for that because it got a little bit more hard and difficult. So some of the things that change with representation, perception, we want a diversity of perspectives and identities. That's pretty much what we do with eTwinning. Language and symbols, cultivate understanding and respect across languages and dialects so that people aren't saying, oh, I'm sorry for my accent, or I have a bad accent, or English isn't good, right? But they become empowered to say, hey, I'm learning English and I'm getting better English. And we address biases in the use of languages and symbols. And that could be in your country based on the cultural languages. Guideline 3, building knowledge. That's changed from just comprehension, with comprehension kind of being that idea that students are memorizing something. Now it's building knowledge as they move on and learn from it as they go in. Diverse ways of knowing. If we had more time to go through this, and which of the following are your preferred methods for gaining knowledge or making sense of information? Authority, memorization, storytelling, systems approach is a wide range. And we compare this with which approaches are valued in today's schools. And then you say, wow, there's a big disconnect between the types of way that I learn or people learn and what we're asking students to do in school. Memorization, for example, or authority might be the way. And we move to the principle of engagement, welcoming interests and identities. It's important. Nurture joy and play, as we talked about, and then address the biases, threats, and distractions. With sustaining effort and persistence, we had foster collaboration, interdependence, and collective learning, and then foster belonging in community in the classroom. And this is maybe something for the nursery school and for kindergartens, primary school, but now it's really up there in secondary school and universities too. For designing options for emotional capacity, cultivate empathy, and restorative practices. And for this, the empathy part is understanding what might be hard and that being flexible, maybe with deadlines or flexible about how the way that it can be turned in, accepting videos and not just papers. Under Tasha Fitzgerald, if racism is an issue in your school, you work with this topic, I can certainly recommend these books. She's a UDL practitioner and works with anti-racism. So https www.buildingblocksofbrilliance.com. We switch to action and expression to design the options for the different interaction between student and student, so peer review, student and teacher, and then student and materials, whether you're using a Moodle classroom or a textbook and those things. So the guidelines for expression and communication address biases related to modes of expression and communication. So if you see the images, very typical for UDL, there's the teacher helping the learner learn how to swim, the same way you'd be doing math or you'd be doing science. And the student has these aids and like swim goggles and a kickboard as they learn to do it. So then through nurture, joy, and play and not fear, in the middle picture, still using aids to get through the learning, but there's an experience of I can do this, I'm getting better at it. And then of course, after repetition of years of learning, maybe you're up at the 9th grade, 10th grade, you're in this world of expert learner and able to learn with an empowered sense of agency without the teacher there anymore, helping and guiding. Might have a coach. Okay, finishing up here, guideline 6 with strategy development. The new one is consideration 6.5, where we're challenging exclusionary practices. So is there something that's excluding people that are poor readers because of visual impairments, right? Text is going to be exclusionary for them. So what are we doing to make it more inclusive so that they enjoy the activity as well? Caitlin Tucker, and some of you might already use project choice boards. Instead of that old write a paragraph or do the homework this way, students have a choice. They get to pick from a project choice board. This is probably done for secondary school level, presenting a TED Talk, making a cartoon movie, building a model, reading a poster, designing a slideshow, or writing a children's book in some kind of way. But the choice for the assignments instead of one. Okay, I want to also let everybody know about this really great UDL AI bot. It's called Ludia, and you can find it through Poe. So put the chat link in the chat. If you Google Ludia and then Poe, P-O-E, you'll come right to it. It's a free account. You can ask for support by principal. And so I had my class, I have a class for future teacher students, and I have them take their lesson. And because Ludia is all around UDL, they put the lesson in the chat bot and say, please revise with suggestions for representation, or please revise for action and expression. And Ludia will give suggestions. What's nice about Ludia, it's not like ChatGPT and it just doesn't come up with something. It will prompt you to what exactly are you interested in with representation, or what kind of learners are going to be associated with it. So certainly Ludia was developed by Beth Stark and Jeremy Rostan. They do webinars, look for them online too. And it would be wonderful to try this app. A lot of us are becoming excited by AI and not scared anymore about it because we realize it's here. So how are we using it? So use it, especially if UDL is new for you and you can learn it. All right, so let's sum up. We're getting towards the end. I want to get in some time for some questions and some good answers and things. UDL, designed with multiple means of representation, right? That's the materials. Foster engagement through choice and cultural relevance. eTwinning projects do that because they're interculturally related. Design flexible methods of expression and assessment, and that's the test. So what we're trying to get away is this old world of text to test, right? So we're thinking about what are the other ways that you can assess student achievement of the learning objective. Build an inclusive and supportive classroom experience. And number 5, colleagues, relatives, help Ludia, special interest groups, all of this can help you foster a UDL mindset. So I think what I'll do at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And then here are the presentation slides too. If you'd like to have these slides, I'll leave it up for maybe a minute. You can use your QR code to get them. We can continue to engage. And what would be really super interesting now is if we thought about eTwinning and UDL. Like, what can you do, or how can UDL improve your eTwinning projects? So how are we? Let's see in the chat.
Well, thank
Yes.
you very much, Richard, for this inspiring presentation and for sharing all of your knowledge. The participants learned a lot, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback in the comments. And as questions are slowly coming in, let's start maybe with how we can make this into an eTwinning project. How can we use this new framework into something that can be, implemented in classrooms? Exactly.
Yeah, I love that question. Most of the projects, they end up being a presentation, or there's a essay that's written, or a paragraph, or a book. So with UDL, it would say, what are some more of these options from the beginning? Give the students a choice. Here are 5 or 6 different things to do. And sometimes we say we have 5 groups. So this group does this group does that, this group does, but by giving them the choice, they can figure out themselves the idea of what they're going to do. The other thing could be the topic of the eTwinning project. Lots of times we come up with the project idea because it's related to the curriculum, and then all the groups have to do the same project, the same idea. Now shift that around a little bit so that everybody's not doing the same thing, but they're picking different areas of how they work and they move, from. If you're out there and you're from a university as an ITE specialist, an easy way to do a fun, easy tutoring project is to take your current lesson plans, run them through Lydia so that you're learning a little bit about AI and seeing how AI can help with lessons, and then you're learning about UDL at the same time. The other nice thing you can do, even with kids who are as young as 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, is start off the project. You know how we have icebreakers and orientation? It could be a lesson around, how do you learn? What is a good learner to you? How do you know when you've learned something? And when you have these conversations with 10-year-olds, with 12-year-olds, it's amazing what they tell you, because they are very much aware of school and that school has pressure on them to learn. So if you start having these wonderful conversations at the beginning of an eTwinning project, how do you learn about another culture? How do you learn about another country? How do you want to learn about this particular way? What's the most interesting thing about this? They might say things like the cooking, or the food, or the music, or the clothes, or the language. And then that can be ways that you start grouping the people and put them together. So I just think it's an amazing, when I've started doing this with my classes, a number of years ago, the very first class, whatever it is, on Zoom or in the classroom, and I asked them, hey, here's the syllabus, here's what we're going to learn. How do you plan on learning this? And the conversations, well, I'm going to
Wonderful.
do this, I'm going to do this, right? And they kind of move in.
Wonderful.
Does that make
Thank
sense,
you.
Kira?
Yes, a lot. Thank you. I'm sure the participants also understand. We also had a question of someone saying, I have the feeling students and parents expect the conservative ways of learning and teaching, and trying to do something different is very difficult. So the first question often asked is, how can you grade it? Can you give a short answer to that? Because we have more questions coming in, and I want to give
Yeah,
everyone
you're right. Let
an
me
answer.
give a quick one too. Sometimes you're forced, you have to grade and accept it. There's some way that it can be graded for the attempt and for the effort and not that it's being perfect. What parents like is they hear the typical way, they would take a test and did a great job. But if you can get them to start thinking, hey, your kid is different. Every kid is different. One test is not going to be appropriate for everybody. Then they start opening their minds to, oh, I like that. My child is being treated as a person and not just as a number.
Great, thank you. Another question was, how can I use this to encourage my secondary staff to take this on board so they don't think of it as something that is extra work?
I love this question because it really isn't more work. I mean, it sounds like it is. You have to learn the whole thing. But what you do is to try to have like, hey, we're going to have a UDL lunch and learn. Everybody bring lunch and you sit around and then say, hey, guess what, you guys? You already do UDL. UDL is all part because you're already a good teacher. This is just now. And then I play a game where I go, ERA. E is engagement, R is representation, A is action, ERA, ERA. And so we play around and okay, everyone's adults and they start laughing, but it sticks in the head and then they're like, and it's, oh, okay, UDL, 1, 2, 3, ERA, engagement, representation, action, expression. It's the motivation part, plus the course materials, and then how I'm testing it. And then get everybody to say, is that easy or hard? And then they just do that. So they're not worrying about some huge framework at first and then getting into all these new rules. But it's a fun activity that they're doing as kind of friends or colleagues teaching the same subject. And you change the narrative and say, it's not hard, it's really kind of a fun thing. But the question's a great one because secondary school, everybody's super busy. This is not a sprint. It's a real marathon about saying, hey, we're now going to be committed to UDL and it's changing people's minds. It's really a paradigm shift. The easiest way I could maybe do it quickly is say it changes from thinking about teaching, teaching, teaching to learning, learning, learning. You're measuring the learning. How is the learning? Not how am I teaching? How's the learning going? Are they learning this material? And then look at it and see if it's one of the principles of E, of R, or A, where the difficulty is coming in.
Great, thank you. I think that's very useful for everyone and a great way to reframe the hard work. We also have a question that has been asked a lot. First, with a nice compliment for you. Thank you for the interesting presentation. Following the question, can this framework be applied to all steps of an eTwinning project? And what can we do to make preparation easier and less time consuming?
I love it, right? And that's a perfect question to ask Ludia, and put that in the chat bot to get a good answer from it. If we had more time just to demo that, but just off the top of my head too, is to think about options. Don't get afraid about UDL being this huge scary thing that you have to go down and something in there too. It's just, how we have to create the project and there's an overview of the project. So at that point, when we're writing the overview, the description, write it as a draft and then go, okay, what are the course materials? What's the representations we're going to involve with it? What's the final deliverable? Are there options for this final deliverable instead of just saying it's going to be one thing? And now, what have I built in there to motivate the students to be sustained so that they're really kind of interested? Where's the curiosity going from this? It's something that they're interested in, music or art. What's moving forward that? And then the next stage is also with the work project plan, right? You're making the project to step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. As you're putting all those things, then look at them and say, okay, where might UDL help or move something a little bit easier with that? But I love this part where it says, what can we do to make preparation easier and less time consuming? I don't know. It is like I have classes right now on eTwinning and they're all doing their projects this week. And I see how much time it's taking them to put these steps together because they're able to have the information to put it into the eTwinning platform and get your twin space. And there's just a lot about thinking that. So maybe it's changing the narrative to thinking about, oh, this is taking me a lot of time. It's time consuming. This is fun because now if I put the UDL part in it, the projects in the end are going to be that much better when we kind of move before. But what I would love, Maria, this is a wonderful question, is for us to start with eTwinning, is revisit UDL throughout the rest of the year, like maybe have a special webinar just on representation in eTwinning, or just on action and expression, that we become kind of UDL eTwinnings people. And over the next year or two, have this be an ongoing dialogue.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great way to approach it, and to have more sort of a holistic, all-round approach to it. Now that we are slowly, sadly having to round off, I wanted to say thank you again, Richard, in the first place for accepting our invitation, and more so for sharing all of the expertise and the knowledge today. It's, yeah, a new framework in UDL is always a bit tricky, and I think you explained it perfectly. And before we officially close this session, just a bit of practical information. The evaluation form has been shared by my colleague Veronica in the chat. If you could please fill in the survey after the webinar, that would help us enormously. And secondly is about our upcoming professional development offer. As we are nearing the end of the year, we still have some courses and webinars running. So please visit the course catalog on the European School Education platform to not miss any exciting opportunities. And also for next year, early after Christmas break, you can find our new courses and webinars on the platform as well. Thank you for joining us today, and many thanks, Richard. In the eTwinning webinars, we have the custom to leave the floor to our speakers for a final word, suggestion, or wrap up to share with our participants. What would you like to leave the participants with today?
Some of I have some friends out there. I see a lot of people too. I didn't get to say names. I just want to say hello to all the friends out there. And if I don't know you yet, you are a friend. Some of I'm an American guy, and we celebrated this Thanksgiving holiday. And keeping with that, I just want to tell you how thankful I am that people like you are out there and are interested, and that we can be together on this Friday afternoon after a busy school week, getting ready for another busy school week, and just share as colleagues and professionals. You probably heard me say this before, but I really believe it. The world is kind of a crazy place right now with politics and war and conflicts and all kinds of pressures and stress and things going on. And teachers are the heroes. We're the ones that are bringing smiles to these kids' faces, and to get them through their days, and to believe in them, and to encourage them, and to help them realize their potentials. So if you've had a particularly hard week, look in the mirror and say, you're a superstar, you're doing a great job, you're a teacher, and keep going.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Richard. And thank you to everyone who joined for today's webinar. I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and I very much hope to see you in our last eTwinning webinar in December on classroom management. The PowerPoint slides and the recording can be found on the webinar page later next week. Please do not forget to fill in the survey. Thank you, Richard, and thank you to all of you. See you next time.